uncertain. While tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation, it's also possible that the effects could be more persistent. Avoiding that outcome would depend on keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored, on the size of the effects, and on how long it takes for them to pass through fully to prices. Our obligation is to keep longer-term inflation expectations well anchored and to make certain that a one-time increase in the price level does not become an ongoing inflation problem. We'll continue to carefully monitor the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. We're well positioned to wait for greater clarity before considering any adjustments to our policy stance. It is too soon to say what will be the appropriate path for monetary policy. We understand the benefits of a solid economy where workers can find jobs and inflation is low and predictable. We also understand that elevated levels of unemployment or inflation can be damaging and painful for communities, families, and businesses. That is why we at the Fed will continue to do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Smoke that loud when you hear Jay Powell.
Oh shit, he's taking questions?
Most importantly, thank you for being here. This feels like quite a moment to be speaking with you, and I want to thank you for your time. He's got it. I want to thank you for being here, and thank you for taking the time to speak with this group of business journalists. Also like to give a special thanks to Heather Long of the Washington Post, who helped make this event possible. So for starters, sir, how's your week been?
Just fine, thank you.
Care to elaborate?
Ice cold.
So far, so good.
Chair Powell, yes, thank you so much for being here and taking our questions. You were talking about the economy as being a very strong economy. You characterized inflation as coming down, employment as being very strong still. However, President Trump earlier this week, when asked about the market volatility we've been seeing, said the volatility was, quote, to be expected. This is a patient that was very sick. We inherited a terrible economy. A lot of voters did and do agree with that assessment, or at least in part. I'm wondering how you would respond to that assessment and the disconnect between the story of the data and the way a lot of people are feeling about the economy.
Sure. So let me just be clear at the start. I make it a practice not to respond to any elected officials' comments, so I don't want to be seen to be doing that. It's just not appropriate for me. But the situation, I think, is this, and people, when they're surveyed, they are unhappy about the economy. That seems to largely reflect the increase in the price level that happened when inflation was high, 2021, 22, and 23 largely. Inflation is now back down to much more normal levels. Yeah. Unemployment is low, the economy has been growing, but people are still experiencing that high price level. In other words, prices don't go down. They know they're paying much more for the basic necessities of life. And they're right that they are, and they're not happy about it, and they're right not to be happy about it. So I think that accounts for the negative sentiment. We, of course, we're looking at inflation, which is the change in prices, and we're seeing that has come down a lot. Yes. You know, unemployment is actually low. It's sort of very close to measures of maximum employment, and the economy's growing. So all those statistics are good, but you know, the price increases of the past few years are weighing on people's budgets.
So I'm from Milwaukee, and I've been talking to business leaders, executives, and consumers in our community, our region, for the last few weeks, mostly before this week's news. Chairman, they're troubled and they're nervous. One business owner told me, if there's a hint of a recession...
This guy sounds like Kyle from Tenacious D.
Yes, share that with you. What's your response?
So I guess I would say, let's start with the fact that the incoming data right through this morning's employment report, which admittedly is from roughly a month ago, the week of March 12th, they took the data in. It still shows us
upside, way up there.
Unemployment is still low. I understand the uncertainty that's weighing on people.
Shit, we're stalling off.
You ask about a recession. We don't actually. We don't make a probability forecast of how likely it is for there to be a recession, but many outside forecasters do. and many of them have raised the likelihood, albeit from very low levels. It's not something that anybody now is forecasting, or some people are starting to. And so there's not much more I can say about that. I realize that the uncertainty is high, what we've learned is that the tariffs are higher than anticipated, higher than almost all forecasters predicted. We still don't know where that comes to rest, though, and we're just going to have to see that through.
At a congressional hearing last year, one of the U.S. representatives said that you were pretty boring, and you thanked him and said that you consider that a very high compliment. And in fact, I feel like it's one of the roles of the Federal Reserve, especially since the housing crisis, to be kind of a ballast, especially in the face of the volatility of the markets and the dramatics that we can experience with the economy. Very steady, no surprises, very reliable. In a moment like this, which also has a lot of drama and unpredictability, but it is not necessarily from an economic crisis, it's by design, it's political. How do you see your role in this moment?
So I think all of the values that you touched on are, in fact, the values that we try to live by. We're driven by, analysis and careful thought and discussion and debate and the merits of things. We try to stay as far as we can from the political process. We don't look at political cycles or things like that. And I think people expect that from us. They expect us to tell the truth, and that's what we're going to do. But at the same time, we don't want to be part of the broader political discussion about the wisdom of policies that are not assigned to us. We're not responsible for trade policy, immigration policy, fiscal policy. So we don't comment on those. Decisions are made by others, and what we do is we use our tools to try to achieve the goals that Congress assigned us, which is maximum employment and price stability. So I like to think that over time we're a source of calm, rational analysis and also of stability. That's really what the business that we're in is, providing financial and macroeconomic stability to the public. That's really our purpose.
So how can businesses and individuals and the Fed make plans for the future when so much is being dictated by the actions of a single person? And do you see yourself as the consoler-in-chief on economic matters?
No, I think, take a step back. What's happening is, as I mentioned, the new administration is making significant policy changes in trade, immigration, fiscal policy, and regulation. And you're still just a couple of months into the administration, and that process will take place. And at a certain point, the new policies will be on the table. They will be having the effects they're going to have on the economy, and uncertainty will decline. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty about where all that's going to sort out, the forms it will take, and what the economic effects will be. If you fast forward a year from now, the uncertainty should be much lower. The actual effects of the policies should then be pretty clear. So I think I understand why it just is highly uncertain, both what the policies will turn out to be, exactly what they'll turn out to be, and also what their effects will be in the near term. We just have to go through that process, and it is just kind of a manifestation of our election cycle and a new administration coming in with new policies.
I mean, given all of the change happening and the fact that we are in a period where things have not settled in yet, and that the Federal Reserve and you as chair are very projection, data-driven, policy-driven, how do you handle a moment like now? I mean, can you tweak your plans and projections? Do you just do you have to reset them?
So, what we've had since in the last few months is, from the staff, has been a placeholder. Rather, they wouldn't call it a forecast because it's so uncertain. They call it a placeholder. And that's kind of how we've been thinking about it. So it's a good time to take a step back and let things clarify. That's why it's just too soon to say what the appropriate monetary policy response will be to these new policies. It is just too soon to say. We can't say with any confidence today. So that's what we're doing. We've taken a step back, and we're watching to see what the policies turn out to be and the ways in which they will affect the economy, and then we'll be able to act. Fortunately, our policy stance is in a good place for us to do that. We're probably moderately restrictive, let's say, so it's not really tight policy, but which is appropriate since inflation is a bit above target. So we think we're well positioned to address whatever may come. And in the meantime, I'd say we're waiting for greater clarity before we consider adjustments.
Jack, what are bonds doing?
Business owners in Wisconsin have told me
Just put a
that,
poll up there. Let me
they
take a
can't make
look.
their plans. They want to expand.
Buy opportunity in the
They wanna build a new
Nasdaq.
facility. They want to hire or do whatever the future calls for.
Yields up a
They
little
say,
bit.
we're trying to look around the corner. We're
3.93.
not even sure where the corner is, and we're not even sure what's around the corner. Sounds like they're in the same position as you are a little bit.
No, we hear the same thing. Of course, we have an incredible network of contacts with businesses and also universities, nonprofits, all different sectors, through the reserve banks and also through the Board of Governors. And that's what we hear. But again, it's a process. We're going through it, and I think we will know when we know what the policies are exactly and what their implications will be for the economy. That will all become clear, and I think that'll be a time when people can make decisions. In the meantime, though, I get it. We're hearing that a lot from people, and we are kind of in the same place, which is waiting for clarity about what our policy path should be.
It might be months away.
We'll have to see.
As you're talking about placeholders right now and having something in the place when there's so much that we don't know, it does occur to me that this is not the first economic shock that you have steered the markets and the economy through. Obviously, there was COVID almost exactly 5 years ago. It seems similar in certain ways with a lot of uncertainty, a lot of shock, also potential disruptions to prices and to supply, which is very much in the Federal Reserve's wheelhouse. I mean, from where you sit, can Liberation Day be compared to kind of the economic effects of COVID? Are they totally different, somewhat related?
Liberation Day.
I think each situation is different. There was COVID. There was also then, in the response to COVID, then there was high inflation, and then there was soft landing, and then and now we have new administration and changes in policies. And every situation, it kind of rhymes, but it's not exactly the same thing. And so in this situation, what we face is what I mentioned in my remarks is you actually have risks for higher unemployment and higher inflation, and that's difficult for a central bank because our tools, which consist of interest rates, either slow down or speed up the economy.
Order filled.
And higher unemployment would call for speeding up the economy, and higher inflation would call for slowing it down. So you can be in a situation, if we find ourselves in that situation, we look at how far each of the two variables is from its goal, and we ask ourselves, how long would it take to get back? And we weigh those things and make a decision about what to do. But there's no question that's a different situation, very difficult situation. When we faced high inflation, it was painful for the country, painful for the people that we serve, but we knew what policy needed to be. We knew we needed to raise rates quite a bit. During the pandemic, we knew what we needed to do. It was very clear the direction that we needed to take with force, and we did.
It's almost a situation potentially where the dual mandate is at odds with itself.
The two goals are, as we say, in tension, or they may be. I'd say that's not what we're seeing right now, but it's the effects at the margin right now would be for higher inflation and perhaps higher unemployment, but that's a marginal effect. I would say you're not in a situation like we were in the 1970s where the two goals were really both pulling in opposite directions and required. It's just very hard for a central bank to be the answer to a situation like that. But that's not the situation we're really in today.
One of the questions from the audience that we had is, if unemployment takes off and inflation takes off, which lever do you go for? Which lever do you, what do you do?
Great question.
So we actually have we have a document called our consensus statement, or the longer version is Statement on Longer Run Goals and Monetary Policy Strategy. And the sixth paragraph of that actually contemplates when the two goals are in tension. And what it says is, think about how far each variable is from its goal, and think about how long it would take for each to get back. So in a way, it's an equation. You're comparing two quantities, which each have two variables. And then you say, you look at that and you think, what do we need to do? And typically this doesn't happen very often. But if one of them is further away, then you would focus on that one. In the case of
Order
high
filled.
inflation, they actually both pointed in the same direction. The labor market was
Order
overheated
filled.
and inflation was very high. So both of those called for, for tight monetary policy. This could be different, but again, we're not actually facing that. Today.
Order filled.
I feel like there's another tension inherent in
Order
your job,
filled.
which is that you're looking at the macro economy, at the global economy really, and the U.S. places in it, but also the data you're looking at is very profoundly human, as
Order
Jim
filled.
has been pointing out. Jobs, I think, and prices are probably the two most human
Order filled.
pieces of data, and
Order filled.
certainly in our day-to-day experience, probably the things that loom the largest. How do you reconcile those two things when you're looking at the data, like both the global markets and knowing that the data represents a lot of lives and jobs and egg prices and things like that?
So I think at the Fed, we always
Amazing.
keep a focus on the people
Order
that we serve,
filled.
and we know and are very conscious daily that the things that we do have a real effect on people's lives. We know that, and it really does focus the mind. And I think if you talk to people at
Dakota,
the
are you
Fed,
long?
there's a very strong commitment to serving
Yeah,
the
just
public as well as we possibly can. Economic
9:45.
events are just very, very unpredictable at times, and there are shocks that you can't see coming. But nonetheless, our job is to, whatever happens, use our tools to bring the economy back to stability, back to price stability, back to maximum employment. And that's what we do. But you're right. We try to keep everybody in the room with us when we're thinking about what to do.
So in response to the last round of tariffs, Harley-Davidson, which is based in Milwaukee, moved some production to Thailand. Now the company might be whipsawed again by the new tariffs. It could be really devastating for sales, for employment, for the future of that company. But a lot of companies are in that same position. And what do you say to companies like Harley-Davidson and their workers?
So it just isn't, I really want to stick to our knitting. I mean, we have this great thing called our independence of monetary policy, and that's critical for us to be able to do our job. But for us to keep that independence, we need to not succumb to the temptation to want to be a player on issues that are not assigned to us. And trade policy is one of those. There are many, many issues that people love to try to pull us in on, almost every issue, really. And we just need to stick to our knitting, not get pulled into those things. And so trade policy is a classic one. Energy policy is another. Climate change, immigration is not really, although all of those things have economic implications, and it gets argued that way. But if we treated those as our job,
Order filled.
the case for our independence would disappear. So I really can't comment on, we hear the same stories like that, but honestly, the policymakers
Order
who are
filled.
charged with that, they're probably hearing the same stories too, and they're reaching a judgment about what's in the best interest of the country in the long run. That's what they are doing, I guess, and that's,
Order
so it's
filled.
not for us to comment on that.
What happens inside the Fed at a moment like right now, when there's so much change and quite a bit of uncertainty, when you're watching things unfold? What does that look
Doing his
like,
job right now.
practically speaking? What are people doing inside the building?
So I'm very proud to work with the people I work with. I can tell you that in times like this, or times like the pandemic, where the global financial markets were shutting down, the global economy was shutting down, people step forward and they say, "We've got this." These are career people who were here for the global financial crisis. They've got 25 years, 35 years of experience with crises, and they step forward and it's just incredible what they can do and how good they are. It's a great honor to work with them. So right now isn't that situation. We have the situation we have, so our trade people and our inflation people and our macroeconomists are all working hard to kind of digest the news of this week and try to filter that into the forecast that they'll make. And policymakers are doing very much the same thing, and we're reading everything we can about
Order
what's happening
filled.
and lots of outside analysis too. We don't have an FOMC meeting until
Order
May
filled.
6 and 7.
Order
So
filled.
That's really a process that lasts several weeks, and we're not quite at that stage yet. But we're kind of thinking ahead to that and working through all of that. I will say though, it feels like we don't need to be in a hurry. It feels like we have time
Really?
to. Yes. It feels like we don't. No, it's like I said. You have inflation's going to be moving up and growth is going to be slowing. But it isn't really, to me, it's not clear at this time what the appropriate path for monetary policy will be. And we're going to need to wait and see how this plays out before we can start to make those adjustments.
Question from the audience. One of our SABU members.
Friends in Milwaukee.
Are you in contact with other central bankers in other countries at a time like this?
Yes, pretty frequently. Absolutely, I am. And the same was true during the other crises I've been through. Not only that, though, we do meet very regularly. The IMF World Bank meetings here in Washington twice a year. We go to Basel multiple times a year to meet. That's all central bankers. And there are also G20 meetings, G7 meetings where the central bankers are there. So we're kind of regularly meeting and talking. And when we're not doing that, we're also texting each other. And
Is there a group chat?
I'm not at liberty to
crowd.
say. No, there's not.
And have you talked to those central bankers this week?
Recently, yeah, I didn't want to get too specific about this, but yes, I have.
What's their sentiment? Can you characterize that?
I'd rather, again, I don't comment on what my international colleagues say, or it's not appropriate. But we're talking about events. We're talking about the implications for the economy. We're discussing what we're hearing from markets and from business people and for from the elected governments too. It's all the things you would expect us to be talking about on a regular basis. It's one of the best things about this role is that the central banks have a lot. We're all non-political, so we think about things in quite similar ways, and they're real bonds. We're not lobbying each other ever on policy. It's just never. That's just not a thing, because we do our policy here, they do their policy there. But we develop really, really good relationships and bonds with them, and it's one of the real pleasures and benefits being able to talk about this, just not only with the great people at the Fed, but also with the leaders around the world.
I mean, it's interesting because it is a job of enormous responsibility and power, but it's also a job. How would you characterize the job of Fed chair? Like, how is it as a job?
Honestly, that's what it is.
Order
I really
filled.
feel just like another person doing that job.
Really?
Yeah.
You just like...
That's how it is. I'm doing a job. I have a job to do. I actually really like the job. I like it a lot.
Pants
enjoy
on
it.
one leg at a time.
It can be stressful at times. Nonetheless, incredibly interesting, great people to work with, really important. What more could you want? But that's what it is. And I'm blessed by working with great colleagues who are really committed to getting it right. I mean, fully appreciate how important it is that we get it right, and do everything we possibly can to bring the best thinking, the best analysis, and debate things, over and over until we feel like we're in the right place. At the same time, there is no certainty in this. You can be wrong because the economy can zig when you thought it was going to zag.
So your term as Fed chair ends about a year from now. What do you think about your job security?
I fully intend to serve all of my term.
Excellent. I mean, as we're getting close to wrapping up, I did want to ask something a little bit out of the box. I think because you do have a position of such great responsibility, people are very curious about you, and I think people tend to read into everything a Fed chair does, small gestures, word choice. I know it's part of our jobs in this room to pore over every word you choose. I did want to ask about one thing that I've wondered about for years, which is your tie. You always seem to wear a purple tie, and every time I think I've seen you, you've worn a purple tie, and I'm wondering if there's significance to that?
Well, at the beginning, the only significance was that I like purple ties.
Okay.
But I will say, so then the next press conference, I reach for a blue tie or a red tie, and I go, maybe not, And so I wind up wearing purple ties. And then it becomes a thing, and now I definitely wear purple ties all the time.
Okay.
But I felt like, it just felt a little awkward to be wearing one that was identified. We are strictly non-political. I can't stress that enough. We are not, it's not that we're bipartisan. We are non-political. We don't do that. And so purple was a good color for that. That's all. Plus, I like purple ties.
Sorry, I didn't give you
Tie.
a purple guitar pick. I have one other Milwaukee question that I
Lavender
overlooked
Dawn.
here, but in Milwaukee and
Milwaukee,
other
not
parts of
Dawn.
the country, the housing market is out of whack. In our market alone, in southeastern Wisconsin, there's 5,000. The market's
Andre,
out of
where's this
whack
guy
by
from?
5,000 houses that need to be on.
Milwaukee.
They have
He's got 3
to
questions
live
in already. Harley Davidson. Now he's
And
talking about
this
Milwaukee. I
report
forgot the
this week
first one,
said
but it's,
tariffs
yeah,
could
Milwaukee.
tack on
90 miles up the
some
road, Jack.
$6,000 to the cost of building a new home. How long are people going to sit on their cheap mortgages from COVID? Thank you very much. And before they move on, before the market frees up.
So you have several things there. The first is we just haven't built enough housing, and we haven't kept up with the demand for housing. So there's an underlying shortage. Before the pandemic, there was a real housing shortage. And by the way, that's happening in many comparable democracies around the world. The second thing is, lock-in, as you say. There were very, very low mortgage rates during COVID, and people are kind of locked in. It would be very expensive to move, and that'll of course wear off over time. And you also mentioned, the costs of materials that might be imported, lumber and nails and things like that. And yeah, and also labor, a lot of labor from in the home building business has been traditionally immigrant labor. So yeah, the sort of new build market, it may face some cost pressures as well. That may very well be the case. That's what we're hearing from home builders, for example, both on the labor side and on the materials side. But even once these short-term things happen, we're still going to have not enough houses. And so it's all, I think for a long time, we're still going to see upward pressure on housing prices, maybe until population growth slows or until we catch up.
You mentioned that we're kind of in a period of waiting right now to see how policy ripples out through the economy. How long do you expect that to take? How long do you expect these big policy changes to show up in our day-to-day lives, in prices and supplies and things like that?
I mean, for a while, we didn't know what was coming on April 2. Now we know what came on April 2. We don't know. There's a lot more to be said about how all that shakes out. But we've come through that, and I think you now know that the
Order
tariffs are
filled.
larger than
Order filled.
people were generally expecting. That much you know now at this point.
Order filled.
And you'll know
Order
more as
filled.
you start to
Order
see
filled.
The effects on the economy. So,
Order filled.
As the months go by, it's hard to say exactly when you'll know. But clearly that learning process is ongoing. We're just seeing that these are new policies, not just the tariff policies, but the other ones as well. There'll be important fiscal legislation coming up fairly soon, and there'll be regulatory changes, significant regulatory changes. You have to really look at all of that to see what the overall effect will be. So I can't give you a date, but all of that is now kind of coming into place.
Aaron, by the way, I understand you need to
sort of,
bounce at some
speed
point.
You would expect policy changes.
Good luck,
to
Barry.
be.
Yeah,
We'll
work to
begin
do,
to see
work
the real
not to
economic
do.
effects as the year goes on.
Yeah, I need to
Good
go
luck,
quick.
Baron.
A really specific
All right.
date.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me again.
Hey.
Believe I'm on next.
Let us know how it goes.
Order filled.
Yeah,
Well,
keep us
yes, I
posted,
know they're
man.
contemplating. And,
You'll hear
working
next
on
week.
fiscal
You'll hear
policy,
next
but,
week.
what I
Yeah,
hear
awesome
is
stuff,
they're
Karen. Thank you so
contemplating,
much. Best of
making,
luck on that. We do the Powell thing is supposed to be
tax
wrapping
cuts
up.
and
Order
We got a
filled.
recap coming in, but I think we got to
Order filled.
we wouldn't be.
It's
We
started. I
have
think we
sort
got
of
to
a
finish it.
placeholder for that too.
Unfortunately,
but,
it's
that's really not ours to comment on. But that's what that's.
Order filled.
Downside.
Thanks,
Thousand
guys.
lot
Order
downside.
filled.
Question from
Later, Baron. Good
Baron.
luck.
a friend in
Have a nice
Milwaukee.
weekend.
Order filled.
Milwaukee.
He has
Said it
clients
again.
that have
Order
homes
filled.
ready to go. Businesses
Order
that are
filled.
ready to launch from their
Hey,
garages.
yeah, Dakota, if you want to bounce too, by all means.
And
thank you
Order
for everything.
filled.
They're just stuck in their garage right now.
Just posted on this trade.
Yeah,
We're trying to
any
go
last
line.
question?
What do you think the impact of
Yeah, go ahead.
Order
the
filled.
uncertainty these
I'm
days
just
will
asking.
have on the
Last
Last
question
questions?
before I hop
Oh.
off here.
So again, we're hearing a lot of that.
I have
People
a
are
friend in
they're just kind of
Milwaukee
waiting.
who says
Order
that,
filled.
the price of his
So-
motorcycle
And I can't tell you
financing
when
is
that
too
will
high. What do you
pass,
say,
but,
Dakota?
ultimately it will pass. We know that.
Get out of here.
At a certain
Later,
point,
Karen.
we'll
Imagine
know
you
enough
just
to
get-
know what
get
the-
out of here.
Thank you for everything, Dakota.
Uncertainty will decline, and we'll be able to see.
See ya. Bye.
With real clarity what.
Order
the effects
filled.
are and what
All
the
right.
effects are. So,
Me, Jack.
but you're right. We hear the
we doing
same
here?
thing from businesses and
Riding
from
it, we're
people that
vibing
they're kind of waiting and
vibing
seeing.
to
There's a
Powell
lot of
here.
waiting and seeing going on, including by us, and that just seems like the right thing to do at a time of elevated uncertainty.
What economic indicators are you watching right now? I mean, very famously, you look at the CPE and obviously the CPI and things like that, but are there any economic indicators in this moment, in these circumstances, that you are watching, focused on,
Sure.
interested in?
So the basic two big data pools are the data around prices and around employment. And we get, in the employment area, we get just really, that's an area where we actually get pretty good data. Although the survey response rates have been lower, nonetheless, we get a lot of different data. And it's not just unemployment, it's participation, it's by age group and things like that. It's wages, it's many, many different things. It's jobs, it's quits.
How you doing, Andre?
All the job creation.
Good.
quits,
I
openings, all
think he's
those
done a
things.
good job.
So that's one thing.
Calming the
On
markets,
inflation,
actually.
we target
He
PCE, personal
hasn't-
consumption expenditure.
Pretty good at that.
inflation,
I'll give him credit.
Not CPI.
Except for the
And
December
two are
FOMC meeting.
broadly-
Obviously,
they move
nothing
in-
earth-shattering.
they
Uncertainty,
move
uncertainty,
together,
uncertainty.
But 25 years ago,
Interesting
the
question
Fed
was,
switched to
which lever do you
PCE.
pull
Almost
first?
looks at CPI.
The
It's
employment
kind of a
or
little bit of a
inflation?
thing,
So
but
he didn't
because
really have a
we
good
think,
answer for that. What do you
it's
think?
really just a better way to capture the inflation.
I would
the
pay
cost
whatever to
pressures
have
that
seen his
households
live
and businesses
reaction to
feel.
the
I think
tariff
it's a better
announcements.
measure. And that's
Oh
what we
my
look at.
gosh.
But they're not that different. I mean,
He
they're
did
just-
what?
They look at different measures. Ultimately,
By how
they're
much?
close together. Those things. On growth,
No
you
heads
look
up?
at what's happening with consumer spending. The economy is overwhelmingly driven
We got
by,
Tuck and coming.
by spend, by consumer spending.
We got a juggling
So
act
you
to
look
do here.
at
We gotta
how
finish.
consumer surveys,
Powell.
how are
We
they
got
feeling,
Tuck
how are they
coming in
spending.
here.
Sometimes the
Morning
surveys are
recap.
really good, but they keep spending. That happens.
I don't know.
It's been
I think
happening really for a while.
It said last question already,
People
but
spent right through.
No, it's not.
the
Mr.
pandemic.
Milwaukee might have
They
another
spent
question.
Right through this time of higher inflation, they kept spending, and forecasters kept thinking, like us, kept thinking that
My whole family
that
works at the
consumption would
Schlitz
slow down.
factory.
That's a really critical thing. After that,
Order filled.
Oh, Zero Day J.
you
Zero
look
Day
at
J
it, that
in
is
there.
also susceptible to
What's up?
sentiment.
The view
You know,
up.
businesses,
Hey, click like, follow,
if they don't
subscribe,
know
Zero
what
Day
to do,
J.
They're not going to do an acquisition.
Tune in,
They're
man.
going to hold off on building a
I know,
factory
Trader
or
X.
hiring
Cannot
people and things like
forget
that.
how.
So we look at,
What if he
I
says
can go on
something
for
and we're
a
all
long time.
blindsided and we're listening
We
for
look
this
at a lot
long?
of data and we try
He
to
says
make
something, we
sense.
get
also
completely
talk to
blindsided and
people
we didn't have it
who
up.
are in the real economy.
And we're in real trouble.
My career was mostly in the private sector, talking to people who ran businesses. And for me, the story doesn't come together until I actually hear from people who are in the economy doing things and what they're
Order
doing.
filled.
And then it sort of fits together better.
Is this like via the beige book or
The
just?
beige book, thank you for mentioning the beige book, and I hope you read it.
I love the beige book.
Andre
That's
knows
great.
beige book.
Everyone should read
Andre.
the beige book. The beige
No
book
one loves
comes
the
out
beige
in
book.
the mid-FOMC
Order
cycle.
filled.
All the 12 reserve banks and all of their incredible comments.
Order
what
filled.
they're saying about what's going on in the economy. So if you want to know, you can look at the national data, but if you want to know what's going on in regions and at different industries, you look at the beige book. So it's really a critical
purple
thing.
book?
And actually, the reserve bank system that we have is an enormous
Red
strength
book?
of the Federal Reserve system.
Red book?
These 12 reserve
There's a
banks
secret book
with
out
their
there.
own, economics departments and own
Pink book or
participants on the
something. There's a secret
FOMC.
book out there.
So that's a great thing to look at.
I'd like to ask you about another body of work that many of us know that you're familiar with. That's the
Milwaukee.
Grateful Dead.
Oh, we got it. Here you go.
Question for you, sir. American Beauty or Terrapin Station?
American Beauty.
Oh, what's your answer?
Well, it's not even a
Not even
pause.
close.
That
Ask
was
me a
so
hard one.
fast.
Working
No,
Man's
that's my era. That's
Order
my era.
filled.
Working Man's Dead
Yes.
or Europe 72?
Oh, both. Yeah,
come
that's
on.
my era. We're in the same era here. So that's, for me,
Dual
it's
mandate.
Order
late
filled.
60s to mid-70s. So you're,
Mr. Gray, what do you think?
it was their
Order
own
filled.
hit, but It's a good song. Okay. Yeah.
Finally,
Are we
there's,
going to do this?
I feel like you're speaking another
Order filled.
language.
there's a well-known Grateful Dead bootlegger who
Order filled.
What's going on?
I believe the permission of the band, Dick's Picks, who's put
Yeah.
out.
Order filled.
So what's your recommendation?
What?
Hundreds of.
I don't have any Dick's picks.
Order filled.
My real interest was late 60s to mid 70s.
Yes.
And I saw him a bunch of times, and I know every note on every song from that era. But since then, I've been busy, actually.
That's why you don't cut the interview.
Well, we thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us here, and we appreciate your work.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
How does it?
Thanks, Jim.
I haven't. What was the quote? I
guys
haven't
wanna
seen
cut
Dick's
it?
pics.
You guys
We need
want
to
to
cut
cut
it.
the
You guys want
stream?
to
All right, let's
Order
go.
filled.
Wow. Click like, follow, subscribe. What just happened? That's how you calm the markets down.
Order
we got a
filled.
recap. Come on in. We got tons
Order
coming up on the other
filled.
side of this. That was
Order
absolutely incredible.
filled.
Jack, great
Order
job.
filled.
We're
Order
right,
filled.
Morning recap.
I'm gonna
Order
check
filled.
out some
Order
big sticks
filled.
right
Order
now.
filled.
Yeah,
I'll see
order
you a little bit
filled.
later, right?
Order
Like
filled.
Michael,
Order filled.
Have fun, Hope.
Order filled.
Hey, thanks.
Order filled. Order filled.
Right. Well,
Order
I guess
filled.
right into
Order
the
filled.
opening recap here.
Order filled.
Opening range trades.
Order
We
filled.
did not take an opening range trade in gold this morning, and I'll tell you why. Yesterday, two distributions of time and volume. The market opened between them. That is
Order filled.
That is a high probability of trading above and below the opening range trade. It's a good thing we didn't take it. It was a very large opening range trade, a 60 ticks. It would have had us take the long first, and